Alright guys, so you guys should all have your pumpkins drawn. So I'm just going to clean up the edge here because apparently some of my stuff got on there. The colors that you're going to need to do your pumpkins are going to be orange, you're going to need yellow, you're going to need red, you're going to need purple, and possibly blue. So let me get all my colors out. I guess that'll work for that. Yeah. Okay, so orange, blue. Sorry, I'm gonna just double check my colors. Yep, okay, we got orange, we got blue. I need to get out my yellow. I need to get out my red. Maybe up here, let me see. Yep, that's what I've been using. Alright, scarlet. We're gonna start with those. I know I'm gonna need my purple too, but that might be right here. Let me see. That's royal blue. Well, we might be using that for our shadow. Because I need purple, but I don't know. That might be. Well, we'll see. Okay. Anyway. So what we're going to start with is our orange, okay? You're just going to make a... Sorry, I got a smudge over here. You're just going to... Apparently it's going to stay. You're going to lightly shade your whole pumpkin, not the stem, but the whole pumpkin, which we will need other colors for the stem. We'll talk about that later, but you're going to shade this whole area lightly orange. Now remember what I told you about if your lines are too dark around the edge, you may have to go around and lighten them up a little because you don't want that to bleed into your pumpkin. So I'm going to do that right now. You might have trouble seeing my lines for a little bit, but sorry, it's my alarm. You may have trouble seeing my my lines a little bit, but as I color, you'll be able to see as I shade in with the color pencils. I just need to lighten them up a little because I don't want it to get muddy looking. So I'm just going to lighten them up. You don't have to erase them. You want to be able to see them, okay? And I'm saying you guys might not be able to see mine, but I can see them perfectly. Yeah, they're getting a little bit light on your side, but that's okay. Okay, so now another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're coloring or shading this, I kind of made a mistake right off the bat when I had these lines going, you know, sideways on it. You really want to go and kind of shade it towards the stem. So if you just kind of very lightly shade each individual little triangle type thing towards the stem, it's going to wind up looking better in the end. And I can go a little bit darker near where my lines would be because those Okay, so that's basically it for the orange. Okay, just for now. I mean, we are going to go back in with the orange because if you remember, the way we do our color blending is we tend to do layers. Okay, so the next layer that I'm going to put in there is I'm going to put in some of my red. Okay, um, you know, you can, another way you can do it is by adding in your yellows. As a matter of fact, I think I'll do my yellow next just because um, the highlights won't be bad. You just go in and add in some highlights. Alright, so this yellow is a nice bright yellow. I'm going to go in and I'm going to go over top of those areas that are going to be highlighted on the light side of my pumpkin. So basically kind of the middle areas of each of these little sections. I'm not going to color in the whole thing. I'm just really kind of focusing on this middle area. It doesn't really take too much time. You can go a little bit up here, especially on the bright side. But this is just to kind of start adding in those other colors that you're going to see. Eventually there's going to be a lot of layers, and that way we don't really see any of this white of the paper coming through. But for now, we're just going to go in with these highlights. Even on the one that I didn't leave white, I'm going to go in with some highlights on that, and maybe even on this one a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing on this little pumpkin over here. And I'm going to go back in with my orange to start. I'm basically starting to add in the shading where it's going to be darkest by the line, and it's going to kind of get lighter as it comes out away from the line. And that's going to be in several spots, like, so not just the line there, but it's also going to be dark right up against the stem, and it's going to get lighter as it gets away from the stem. So there's reason for that. To make this look three-dimensional, you know, we need it to have shadows. Okay. So we're going in with the orange first, but we are going to go in with the darker colors like red. And then on the dark side of the pumpkin, it's going to also have some blue or purple. I usually like to use purple, but we'll see if I can find a good purple to use. And like the way this, you know, keep it kind of rounded like that. Your shading for it. Remember, we don't really want it outlined as much as we want it to be, you know, that blending where it's darker by the creases, it gets lighter as it goes out. It gets a little bit darker towards this edge, but again, we don't want it to be like an outline. So you don't want to leave it like that because that's going to be really outliney. You want to blend it out. Okay. It may take several layers to get this side to look right, and that's okay. You know, expect to go back and forth if you want it to look realistic. still leaving it, even though this is darker side, I'm still going to leave it a little bit lighter in the center. And that's just for the same purpose. We don't want to get too dark too quick. Alright, so now it's starting to get more dynamic looking. I'm going to do the same thing to the smaller pumpkin. Very much like the scales, work in one little spot at a time. You know, the scales from our dragon that we did. this could be a project where you actually use your in-between colors too, if you want. So like your red orange and your yellow orange, you can also use those in this, you know, because the more colors you're blending in, the more dynamic it's going to look. Notice I am getting smudgy here though, so you got to be careful. You don't want to have the whole thing get really smudgy. I mean, it's okay because this is going to be where shadow is going to go anyway, but I'm still going to clean it up a little because I don't like it when it gets smudgy. Now, if you notice this right here, that's going to make it look a little muddy. So I'm probably going to have to go back in and erase out some of that graphite so that it doesn't get real muddy looking when I go to blend. And there are spots in the dark side that I may actually go in and add some of the yellow in. Just to give it a little bit of a highlight, but I want it to be darker, not like the rest of it. Alright, so let's get this side. Alright, so the next thing you're going to need is your red, because we're going to go in with our red next to add in some of the darker areas of the pumpkin. Okay, so I'm going to start on the dark side because that's kind of the safe side. I know it's going to be dark anyway. I'm going to kind of give myself my lines, and I'm going to start shading from the dark areas out. Trying to keep that rounded feel about it. It's going to be, you know, it's rounded this way as well as it's rounded this way. So if you imagine that it's going to have more of those dark areas towards this edge and towards each of these sides. Now I want you to keep in mind that this is the dark side of the pumpkin, so this is going to get even darker, okay? This is not the end of it. This will be even darker than this. There's a little bit of a shadow created on the pumpkin from the stem. I'm going to have to do a time check. See how far in we are. 35 minutes, okay. I'm going to separate this out into at least 2 videos, because you're going to need the video for the stem, and I'm going to do that separate. So I may put the stem with the shadow. I guess it'll depend on how long the stem takes. So do not leave your stem white. So if you're watching this video, you really need to be watching every video that we do for the whole pumpkins. Don't think that you can just do it without watching, because you may miss something and then do it wrong, and then your pumpkins won't look as good. Okay. So this is where it's going to start getting lighter. So this side is going to be darker than that side. All right. I'm just adding a very little bit of the red at each of these kind of corner areas. And a little bit towards the stem. go back in with my orange, because right now it still looks pretty, like you're seeing a lot of the white of the paper, and I want it to be more saturated than that. Notice how I switched. Now I'm doing this side, because that's the side that's farther away from the light source. I'm going to try to be in class this week, guys. I am home. I'm not at school. So I'm going to do my best. My internet is not the best to work with for live Google Meets, but I'm going to do my best to try to be there. You just might have to deal with some glitching and stuff like that, like we used to deal with in the beginning. So hopefully it won't be too bad, and you guys will be able to hear me and understand me. If not, you're going to really have to rely on these videos for a lot of the instruction. I'm not going to be able to do a demo during class because that'll take too much of the internet to try to hook up my document camera and have that working while I'm doing the Google Meet. I don't think that's going to work very well. So, okay, as you can see, it's starting to get more three-dimensional, and that's basically all we're going to be doing, is going back and forth and adding in these dark areas, and then blending it with the orange, and then going back and adding in another color, you know. Remember, don't get too dark too fast. Like this one got a little bit dark on me because I'm trying to rush, and that's probably going to stick out in the end, and I don't want it to. Sorry guys, I'm just double checking. Like I said, I'm going to be working from home. I was just double checking my email. But because I'm working from home, time is at 8:40. Okay. Still got plenty of time. Yeah, 43. Yeah, so this video is probably going to cut off because it only goes up to an hour. This lets you know how much work it goes into these colored pumpkins. That's why I said to you guys, like, these are going to be more dynamic than your gray pumpkins, because the gray is just monochromatic. You only had to worry about one pencil, and you know, you just kind of varied how dark you pressed with that one pencil, and that's how you kind of determined the shading. With this, it's a lot different because the value is determined not only by how hard you're pressing, but by also which color pencil you're using at the moment. So, you know, you need to be thinking about where your shadows are. For orange, you know, in the shadows, it's going to either look red, you know, a reddish orange, or it could even, if it's really dark, it could even get as dark as, like, you know, using the complement, which is blue, to try to add some more darkness to that area. Okay, and I'm going to show you that in this Hopefully I'll get to that. I may have to add, my next video may have to include, you know, adding the really dark areas with the blue. But you need to do the same thing for both pumpkins all the way around. So notice I'm just kind of going around the edges. Now this is getting to the lighter area, so I got to be careful. Like, I don't want to keep going as dark as I was, or it's not going to be right. Alright, so if my light source is from over here, we're going to make this area a little bit darker. Okay. Kind of go right there. With this, the shadow is probably going to kind of go right over here. So I am going to put some of the shadow right here. Just know that there's probably going to be some shadow on top of the stem as well, but that will not be done with red. That'll be done with your, you know, your greens and your browns and stuff, because your stem will have some green and brown in it. And then it may even have a little bit of whatchamacallit, purple, just to really add some darks in there. Okay, so this area is going to start getting dark again. Alright, I'm going to go back in with my orange for most of it, because I need to really get this to look more saturated, so it doesn't look like it's, you know, got a lot of white showing through